on, y'all!
Hey everybody, it's Andy Kushner, host of The Wedding Biz, and here we are with another episode of The Next Level, in which myself and a co-host kind of suss out some of the highlights of the interview and talk about them in ways to help all of us bring our business to the next level. And this one in particular is also going to be helpful on a personal level, even more so. And today's guest co-host is someone that I'm going to have on the show sometime in the next few months, and he is Zach Oxman. And Zach is a true artist, a creative who himself has quite a story as a sculptor, which is apropos to the wedding biz, which you will eventually hear. You'll hear why. And so I was really excited to have Zach on the show to talk about this particular interview. So Zach, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andy. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah. And before we get started, I want to mention that if you missed last week's episode, Amy Moeller, editor-in-chief of Washingtonian Weddings, it was a really interesting interview. And for the next level, we had Michelle Hodges, who is a just phenomenal planner, designer from the same area as Amy, from the DMV. And she was also on the show. And we got a lot of hits on that one, too. So in terms of this morning's interview that was released, it was of Brett Culp, who is an acclaimed filmmaker and social entrepreneur. What's really interesting about Brett, why I want him on the show, is that he started in the luxury end of weddings and had quite a run of it and ended up going through just this fascinating transformation. And if you didn't listen to the actual interview, I really recommend. I mean, look, everyone, I know I say this each week. Every interview to me is just a blow away. But Brett's, I've already heard it twice, and I'm going to listen to it periodically. To me, it was that inspiring. And so, again, if you haven't heard it, take the time to listen to Brett speak. We can't get to all of it in the next level. So, Zach, in terms of what we can talk about, what we have time to talk about, I thought one of the things that came up early in the interview, in the conversation, was talking about something that seems simplistic, but when you get into it, it's just not. And it's the key elements for any business that he's done is how he did it in context. And again, he had a huge run in the wedding business. And there were three elements he broke them down to. One was just doing great work. And then the second was show it to a lot of people. And the third was be real nice, you know?
Right.
I mean, you would think it's, yeah, what about it, right?
Exactly. No, I thought, I really enjoyed listening to him speak because what he really did was he really showed the not so sexy underbelly of being a creative person. And when you're doing these things, I mean, there is, of course, that what part that everyone sees that is truly your creative inspiration. But to manifest that truly as a professional and to carry that on and support yourself to keep working in your art, you have to think about some of these things that he addressed. And that is, how you present yourself, how you talk, how people perceive you. Because the reality is it is all about these relationships. You meet people, and he's absolutely dead on. If someone doesn't like you, they never get to that next level of you. And it doesn't mean that you're sugarcoating or being inauthentic, but we all have choices of the things we say and the topics we talk about and the time we give people. And so I say, I just distill those choices into the ones that are going to make people, enjoy being in your presence, being inspired by the things you might have to say or curious.
Yeah. And he gave this great quote, which he said he attributed it was to someone else, but he brought it up. He said, I love this. He said, all things being equal, people will choose to work with people they like. All things being unequal, people will still choose to work with people they like.
Absolutely. I find, this has probably always been applicable. I find it actually even more so today because attention spans are so less. People are inundated with so much that I think truly one of the first differentiators is the personal experience. It is the relationship because there's an endless supply of pretty pictures, of content, of all of that.
Yeah. It's interesting. He talked about when he gives a presentation, here's what I do, here's all the features, the benefits of it all, how, okay, well then what, right? Because people don't really remember that, right? The actual necessarily exactly the quality of the work in terms of what stays on their mind as time goes on, and he was talking about what they're going to remember beyond that is like we're talking about, who are you? How easy, let's say productive are you to work with? How enjoyable?
Well, and the goal is, as a creative, is to do great work because
step one.
That's ultimately it. So the relationship part or how you initially come off to this person and their interest to explore further reveals your work. Your work has to hold up to what you're doing. So to not lose sight of it, it's not just about, step up the niceness and drop the quality. You really need to do all of it. But what's important is it's not just all about the quality. That's a given. You have to do your best work. You have to do great work.
And that's something he made a point at is don't go so fast here, right? Get really, really good at your craft. And it was interesting. He also said to the point of having the confidence about the craft of your work that now you can also let go in the moment and be kind of improvise when you have to, like especially for us in the event industry. You could get the decor great. You could come with the great band. You could have the cake. But, what if the temperature is too warm? The cake's going to melt. What do you do? The decor, what if something breaks? With the music, someone's sick. There's getting the foundation down first, number one. And then he talked about showing it to a lot of people. I mean, you and I talk about this. You were just in Miami at Art Basel. And if I remember correctly, you had this piece you were installing for someone who had a lot of wealth and a really nice place, and people were going to come to his place. And you wanted to, rather than, get it delivered and later, you wanted to get it done before Art Basel because people are going to be there, right? Chance for you to meet people. And you went in person. That's another interesting thing.
Yeah, well, being there to represent, to be able to nurture those relationships, and yes, and have the work seen. I mean, the energy of the experiences of people seeing your work will help advance what you're doing. Again, with the quality of your work, the relationships you have, and then the exposure, it builds and it grows. And the whole goal is to continue to get opportunities. Each opportunity, you don't start day one with a whole list of opportunities. You start day one with an opportunity.
That's right.
And you do everything you can to maximize that opportunity and turn that into another. And depending on the way your expectations of yourself and those relationships you build, the hope is that creates more and more opportunity that you then learn and you become, professional.
It's interesting. You said something a minute ago about energy of the work too. And I'm thinking how, again, in your specific case, or for those in the event industry, you can experience our work. But when clients and prospective clients and people in the industry who can refer you are also experiencing your energy, it attaches a different perspective to the work itself. Like in your case, they could look at it and say, oh my God, this is beautiful. And then, maybe 5 days later they forget, but you're there and they now get this combination of your personal energy and vibe with it. It imbues something different into it. I think it stays longer.
Right. Well, it certainly gives more context to the piece. They understand it deeper and it conveys, and I think that's part of the authenticity and the creativity is you truly are instilling a part of you in this experience, this artwork that you're creating.
Yeah. And so, that's why I think Brett hit on something really important is that it's not just your work. It's how you present yourself and continuing that relationship. Excuse me, another topic that I really liked. So one of the things Brett does now is these short films, which is almost like a video blog. And he talked about, one was named How to Face the Unknown. And he talked about how some people focus and create intention for a goal, but it wasn't good for him. And the way his energy works is more of a flow person. Remember that whole analogy about the surfer, if you want to mention that?
Right. Yeah. So it was interesting listening to him. He defined himself through two processes, whether it was intention or flow. Intention meaning I'm going to do this, and flow he was describing as being a surfer, more ready for the unknown of that wave and then using his skills and preparation to ride this force. Versus the mountaintop where you're looking at it as just a challenge, that it's this quantifiable, there's a distance, there's a hurdle to climb, and you're step by step conquering it. I think I think they happen sort of simultaneously through your career. You find these hurdles and the hurdles help prepare you for the flow and they kind of go back and forth. But yeah, I thought that was fascinating. I think it's something in my work that if I were to look back on the arc, the beginning part of my career starts with a lot more hurdles. You're trying to master a particular thing. You see these objectives and you're trying to achieve them. And ultimately what happens is, it's human nature. It's part of the process. You're going to have failures. You're going to have all these experiences as you're doing this, that at a point you start realizing you learn how to adapt and adjust to all these different things. So you go into the next not worrying about how big or how hard it is. You have confidence in your abilities to adjust, adapt, and just handle it. It creates an incredible freedom, which is all part of untapping the best creative in you.
Yeah, he talked, I love how he termed it. He said that, it was interesting. He also said that tied to this, he loves what he's doing right now, but he's open to the idea that 3 years from now, he might not be doing this. And so
right.
I loved how he said it, becoming comfortable with the mysteries of my life.
Absolutely. I think what happens is when I feel like the other side of that coin is hanging on to an identity or a path that you perceive as who you are. But it's a very hard thing to hold on to something that's completely elusive. Life throws us all kinds of twists and turns. We change. That moment, that thing you're hanging on to is you today.
Yeah.
And what are you, 5 years from now, and what have you learned, and what do you even want to do? So you're hanging on to something that's not necessarily even applicable, as opposed to you're operating within, it sounds in the moment, but the reality is you're operating with all the skills and creativity that you have without hanging on to the bar next to you. You're just on this.
Well, and we're also talking about an element of control here, and I remember how he termed that too. He was saying, that we think that the things that we have, the things that we enjoy and how we appreciate them, that we have to control, or otherwise we don't really have them. And he was saying how that really is an illusion, which is what you're saying. And that when he was talking about when you think you have your world completely figured out, right? Everything is just exactly the way it needs to be. Everything's perfect. That's when the storm comes. And if you're locked into that kind of way of thinking and living, and I've been guilty of that as throughout, my growth as a human being, there's going to be a storm that's going to come, and then you're not prepared. You just get blown away by it.
Well, exactly. And I think ultimately it's the same thing happens to everyone. It's what you do when those things happen, because where one person is derailed and completely debased from it, the other person finds an opportunity out of it. Now, and what often happens is it's very hard to do that consciously. It's very hard to say, I am going to just blow my world up at the moment and just start over. So it looks like it's the tragedy. It looks like it's this external force caused it. And ultimately, it's not so much that that's what caused it, but that is the impetus. That's what it finally took to make you do this. And so you kind of blame it, but in a way, it needs to happen. This is what happens. But we just remember that moment that made us finally do it.
Yeah, and we've known each other for a while. We've both told our stories about how we've both been through these. And it's getting comfortable with that. There's that cliche out there, but I love it though. It's when one door closes, another's opening. And I find myself, I'm very black and white the way I think like this. And for me, when I run into something that I feel is just, what the hell happened? It's just not going the way I thought. It's falling apart. What the hell am I going to do? And I have a tendency, sometimes I'll, catastrophize it. That's not unusual for me. And, but then I remember that, hold on a minute, let me think about all the past experiences I've had where I felt like that and I survived. And if anything, I'll look back and say, thank you for that, what I thought was a quote unquote disaster, a catastrophe, or quote unquote, I never use the word, Zach, failure. I don't use it anymore. Like people will say a marriage failed or the business failed. No, it was a huge learning experience, if you're open to it, to take you to that next level.
Absolutely. And yeah, and that's your perception of that moment and what you ultimately do with it. It can be incredibly enriching. And I think for me, what I found is, what starts is you start thinking, for myself, oh, I'm getting good at dealing with all these, things, catastrophe, whatever. And the reality is it's not so much that you're getting better at dealing with that, but you've demystified them. They're not catastrophes anymore. They're just life. Life goes through these evolutions and these changes, and you roll with them. So you're going into it without all this energy spent holding on. Like we're saying, you are just doing what you do and rolling with it.
And, there are like cycles. I mean, geez, and it just never ends. It's interesting. These really big names that I've had on the show, which people will recognize, there's the Preston Bailey and David Tutera and Colin Cowie and so many of them. And even those three right there talked about in their interviews on this show, massive disappointment and crashes that they experienced and how it felt, and how difficult and challenging, whether it was financial or strictly artistic or metaphysical, existential, all of it put together. I would say it's usually all put together. And then how they find something else and come out of it. And then it eventually, hopefully not so painful, but it happens again. I mean, it's till we're 6 feet under, really.
Absolutely. I mean, my challenge to myself is I think some of my greatest growth has come out of some of the most painful aspects. Is I'd love to, an aspiration for me is to have that level of growth without those external, forces having to do. Is there a way to do it? Because it is what offers the best in us. There's
a book, this is making me think about it. I brought it up before. It's called, I think, The Objection is the Way by Ryan Holiday, and he talks about embracing the, not objection, the obstacle is the way. That's what he says, right? And which is what we're talking about here, if you kind of suss it down to that. And he talks about how seeing it that way and eventually getting to the point in his life where he understands that, again, it's not the end of everything. It's not a wall. It's an obstacle, which helps him to find a way around, which takes you to another level.
And you can even frame it, Stephen Pressfield writes about these in the forms of resistance or these psychological things being a creative, but you can paradox yourself. These things, for instance, I had these series of sculptures I made, speculatively built, and became very close to them over a several-year period, very vulnerable, emotional pieces. And I had, for 20 years, everything I made, my goal was to sell my work. And one day, someone was in my studio and I'm sharing, and they said, Zach, I don't think you want to sell these. And I had to think, because the way I was talking about it, I'm like, that's kind of an interesting question to think of. This is what I do. And there was a part of me when I started thinking back and questioning that I think there was something about that. There was a truth in that. And then I started questioning why. And I said to myself, maybe it's because I'm afraid I'll never make something better. And I said, I've refused to accept that. So now I have to sell them, because selling them proves that I'm not done. I will make something else, as opposed to hanging on to this and carrying this around for the rest of my thing. And so I changed that paradox. So this thing that I was sort of really fearing that might never make a better piece, I used it as a tool. And that's what you can do. So obstacles, you can sit there and reframe, instead of why is this in my way? This is an opportunity for you to adjust and grow.
Yeah. And, the moments I'm able to do that, what you're talking about, and, maybe for a moment I'll start to go into my old way and I'll catch myself and it's like, hold on. Let's look at this. And I love, I said it before, when I can look back and say, wow, if it weren't for that, things would not be kicking ass like right now. And Brett gave an example, trying to remember the specifics of it. Oh, so he was in the Lux market for something like 10 years. I mean, really in it deeply, being, very successful on all the surface. And then the 2008 recession hit. And he said, because he was way too entrenched in that market, it all went. And he was really, got depressed, was flipping out, all of it, and then talked about how, and again, y'all got to listen to the interview, you got to listen to the conversation, but he talks about how it led in various ways to this next part of his life, which again, he said if it weren't for being in the wedding business, he wouldn't be able to do it. But in terms of it falling apart because of the economy, the way he set up his business, these opportunities started to come. He started to see it and to embrace it. And he's now this filmmaker doing a whole different thing in his life. And he's doing these keynote speeches that he's amazing at. And he said that if it weren't for that recession, there's no way he would have found what he's doing today. No way. So, there's a great quote. The quote is him. I mean, it's a long one. I took it down because I think this is apropos with what we're talking about. Before we wrap up, to address this, he said, I deeply believe that the universe is benevolent, that life wants good for us, and the pain that we're going through is often just a stage to get to that better place that we don't even see. We're too ignorant, too limited in our thinking to see all of the possibilities that could be for us. Sometimes we have to go through that pain for the stage to get wiped clean enough to be able to be open to something new, something better.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's that pain. Maybe I'm not a neurologist, but I think we often stay in the front of our brains, this emotional, very frontal part. And it's truly those deep, painful experiences that go much deeper into us, that really tap into something beyond just that frontal emotional, but really this force that runs through us. And it does, I think it's where it offers up those solutions.
Yeah. And I love just, trusting that, somehow getting to the point where you are, I don't want to say relaxed enough, but almost in a sense, trusting, like he said, because then you see it. Then you see the opportunity presenting itself. Well, that is all we have time for today. I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode of The Next Level. Be sure to check out not only the interview of Brett, but his website, which is brettculp.com, BRETTCULP, brettculp.com. There's great stuff in there. You should really spend some time. And I urge you to go there and check out what he's got and learn all about his filmmaking and wonderful keynote speaking. And I would definitely check out this short video series that Zach and I were kind of referring to. It's very inspiring. And Zach, man, I mean, Zach Oxman's website, Zachary Oxman. Now, what call you Zach, but then it's Zachary you're throwing us, man.
It's the professional name.
Are you speechless?
Yeah, I planted my web flag, 25 years ago, whatever, and I'm kind of rolling with it.
Well, so Zach's website you got to check out too. I mean, trust me on this. It's Zachary, Zachary, Oxman, Oxman. So ZacharyOxman.com. All of this is in the show notes. So you just go to the show notes. You're going to see it all. And check out Wedding Biz website, theweddingbiz.com. And if you enjoyed this, I hope you did. I love this one. Please share it with friends, family. And this one can work for anyone, not just us in the event business. And I'm not sure who we're releasing next week. I got so many great ones in the can. I'm completely confused and perplexed. They're all so good, but be sure to join us next week with another episode of The Wedding Biz and of The Next Level.